that today, we actually started out with more remote sites than what we have ended up with, but we're doing this a little bit differently today than what we typically do our learning community. Generally, we have a learning community that is a 4-hour block, and because we're really trying to enable the folks from schools to participate, Kelly's presentation is really focused on young children and youth, and we wanted to be able to make sure that schools can participate. So we're doing it after school from 3:30 to 5:30 in 2 sessions. So it's a little bit of an experiment with what we're doing today, and we have encouraged our online folks as much as they could to be able to kind of get together and gather in one location wherever might be convenient for them, so that they could practice some of the things that Kelly will be talking about, because she's got a very interactive presentation, and so we try to encourage our online folks to participate in that way. So we have the folks here in Lake County, Lakeport, County Office of Education, and we have a good representation of the schools from around the lake represented here today. And we have the online folks, and we acknowledge them. They're an important part of the work that we do, and they are representing various different counties. The last I checked, I noticed that there were some folks from Humboldt, some folks from Del Norte, some folks from SISKIYOU, some folks from SHASTA, some folks from out of the northern region, actually, Glenn County and Sacramento, and some of those places joining in today. So we're really delighted to have everybody participating as part of this learning community. Strategies 2.0 is funded by the State Office for Child Abuse Prevention, and so we just want to acknowledge that with gratitude for the fact that they support this endeavor and have put their funding behind it. And the strategy's mission here is to be a catalyst for the professional skills, organizational structure, and community relationships necessary to mitigate the risk factors for child abuse and neglect, and to promote child, family, and community well-being. And so everything that we've been doing through this season of learning communities has been trying to look at the lens of resiliency building. This came out of our very early learning community surveys, where we wanted to find out what should we focus on, what would be common throughout our region that people would like to learn more about. And so this whole issue of trauma exposure floated up to the top, and as we talked about that a little bit more, it really emerged as resiliency building would be the thing that people would like to know more about. So we've been looking at that through this season of learning community from different lenses. So we looked at it through the lens of social connections. We looked at it through the lens of prevention and what OCAP is trying to move forward in terms of the initiatives that they're doing. We looked at it through the lens of data sharing and using the protective factor survey as a common tool across multiple organizations to try to take a look at where is change happening and what can we say about resiliency in our families by using this tool. And today we've got Kelly, who's going to look at it through this other lens of restorative practices and really doing some nuts and bolts activities that can be applied with children in the classroom and elsewhere. So one of the things that the general umbrella over what Strategies is doing through its different pathways is growing knowledge and networks for professionals who are working with families. And there are 3 main ways that this is happening through Strategies 2.0. One of them is the trainings, and there have been a number of trainings offered here in Lake County. Another is consulting, and the third is what we're experiencing today, the learning community. These are different ways that you can participate on Strategies website and newsletter, and register for trainings, and also register for learning communities. One of the things that we feel is valuable about participating in a learning community is it is a way to increase your cross-sector partnerships, and that is just a theme that has come through since the beginning of implementing these different strategies 2.0 activities, that everything we're doing essentially is a collaboration and a partnership on some level. And so if you really want to increase the impact of the work you're doing, then the more you can infuse that across partnerships and different collaborations, the more that heightens your opportunity to make impact. And then we're also looking at organizational capacity to solve pressing problems. And this is a pressing issue. We're looking at classroom behavior, we're looking at just children and families and just that general whole venue. When you've got kids that are, acting out or doing things that are difficult to be able to manage, it presents problems, and we're trying to figure out how to solve those, and those problems are not always easy. Some of them are complex. And so this is one of the things that we're hoping that our learning communities can be a vehicle for giving some insight and tools around those issues. Evaluation is a very important part of what we do in Strategies 2.0. And so at the end of every one of our learning communities, at the end of every training, at the end of everything we do, there's evaluation. And there's also an annual evaluation that is done. And you can see that last year at the end, about 10% of the people participated in that survey, and 84% said that they gained or implemented skills or tools or knowledge. And so we're very hopeful that when you leave here today, you will be acquiring some skills and tools that you can take with you. If you're interested in social media, these are different ways that you can participate using these various hashtags. And I'm just giving you a very general agenda here. Kelly has a little bit more specific agenda that she will share with you, but she is the major presentation today. She's the one that's going to be really unfolding these different practices and information and skills. And then we'll have reflections and evaluation, or questions and answers and evaluation at the end. Oh. Well, I don't know where the objectives went. Let's see. There they are. Somebody did something fancy with them. When I do things, they're all on one page at one time. So we're going to continue to focus on these lenses, as I've said. And we're going to reflect on the science that contributes to resiliency building. And we're going to share mini lessons and practice self-regulation tools, and Kelly will be sharing that with us. And I think that's going to bring us to Kelly. So Kelly, you're on. Thank you. Let me give you this. We do.
Thank you. Let's see. Okay. Hello. So happy to be in Lake County, in Lakeport, with all of you and with everyone who is joining us remotely. So let's get started. I just want to give you a brief little tidbit of who I am and why you'll be spending this afternoon with me, and next Wednesday hopefully you can come for the second part. Let me grab my notes over here. This is we opened this up to educators, these two sessions, but what I'm going to talk about tonight and this afternoon and next week really relates to anyone that's breathing. But I'm going to tell you where I come from in terms of my educational background. This is my 28th year in education, and I've taught every grade from preschool through 8th grade. I also work with high school grade students. I was a literacy coach for 4 years through the California Reading and Literature Project, so I traveled around the state and did literacy work. Then went on to be a school site vice principal at our middle school in Redding. And then after that experience, went back across the street where I was a literacy coach to be the school site principal at a K-5 campus. That school, my heart is there still, Rother Elementary. That school is in the district that I was a part of, the lowest socioeconomic. We had 100% free and reduced lunch, the highest incident of English language learners. And I would argue, at least when I was there 6 years ago, the highest incident of mental illness with the parents that I worked with. Are you hearing me okay? Okay. So before I was formally trained in any of this, I was really living it on the ground floor. And I actually went back to the program where I got my administrative credential and said, so you guys are missing a class. I was not prepared. I was not prepared for what I was met with the parents and the verbal abuse and the kinds of trauma that I experienced as a school site administrator, because these very hurting parents didn't understand the behaviors of their children. And the scapegoat is always the administrator or the person who is, the one that you have to come and meet with. So all of that woven into then my 5th year there as an administrator, Shasta County Office of Ed called me and said, hey, Kelly, we have an issue with literacy in our county, and we want to know if you can come be a director with us and help us with that issue. So it was very difficult to leave, but I did. And this is my 6th year in that role. And it's funny because they hired me to do literacy, but what I do mostly is trauma. Because what we realize about our community, and I think is true for a lot of the people that are tuning in tonight and those of you sitting in this room, if we don't look at the social emotional foundation and milieu of the children that come to us from their homes, we have a really difficult time teaching them anything. We have a really difficult time addressing the Common Core standards, the higher order level kinds of concepts of thought that we're supposed to be addressing in classrooms if we don't first take a look at that. So tonight really is about that. What happened once I came on board and we realized that that was the issue for us in our community was that First Five paid to have me trained through Bruce Perry's Trauma Academy. So a lot of what you'll hear tonight is the neurosequential model of education. Fabulous practitioner in my community, Tara Tate, is the neurosequential model of therapeutics. She's NMT, I'm NME. And you, with that, you get tools, you get knowledge. It's just a really, it's a rich path to take in terms of learning about how all of this works. I also, Bruce Perry. Mm-hmm. And anything I say that is in question, I'm going to write it up here so that it's clear. He is the founder of the Trauma Academy. Okay. Yeah. Bruce Perry Trauma Academy. So I am NME, Neurosequential Model of Education, where a lot of the science comes from that we'll talk about tonight. But then I also, because I sit on the steering committee for the Strengthening Families Collaborative in my community, we brought in Laura Porter and Bob Onda. Bob Onda is one of the original doctors that conducted the ACEs study. I know that the ACEs study is on the agenda. You guys I know are steeped in it. You know about the science of it. I'm just going to share some pearls because I work directly with one of the doctors that did the original study, some ahas for me that have changed my life. So I'm an ACE interface trainer. So that work we do all over Shasta County. And I get to work with both of those amazing people really closely. So I want to share some pearls with you from that. I'm also trained through IIRP in restorative practices. We're going to talk about restorative practices and resilience building next week. This week, we're going to talk more about the science and some hands-on tools that you can go tomorrow and start implementing, I'll be honest, in your own life and in the lives of the young people that you work with. And is that, that's good? All right. Okay. Oh, the notes. Okay. So also, some of what you'll hear tonight comes from my trainings that I've gone to, attended in mindfulness practices, just a whole host of different pieces of research. I, of course, when you get into this, probably as many of you are in the room and remotely, you become an avid reader. And I spend a lot of money on Audible because I travel a lot around the state to work with people. It's funny because 3 years ago, I said at a leadership team meeting that this is the most important work I've ever done in my entire life and that I would go anywhere to share this message because it literally changes lives. And then they came back a few months later and said, so Kelly, guess what? Shasta County got this grant and Orange County got this grant. So we're going to send you on the road to 20 different communities this year. That was last year when my son was 2 years old. Now this year, this is my 13th. Actually, this is my 13th and final interaction through the foster youth grant that funded, California Department of Education funded it. So it's just been such a joy and a pleasure to get to interact with people all over the state. So that's kind of who I am and where I come from. I just mentioned my son. He just turned 3 in January. My husband and I adopted him through Child Protective Services in Shasta County. A young couple came forward. They were pregnant and said, we can't raise this baby boy. So my husband and I got to adopt him from birth. His birth father is African American, and his birth mother is Caucasian. And after we agreed to it and signed up for it, we found out that the birth father was actually a student of mine. The one student who I had, you do this one time. I've never given my personal cell phone number out to a student. This is the birth father. He's the one that I gave the phone number out to because in my 3rd year of working with him, I was at the junior high as vice principal. Police department came to take him because his mom was being incarcerated. And I handed him my business card and tearfully said, if you ever need anything, you call me day or night. And I never heard from him. But then 6 years later, we got a call from a social worker that said there's a young man who can't keep his baby boy and wants to know if you'll raise it. So I'm in contact still with the parents, and I send photographs of Xavier, our son, and he is absolutely the light of our lives. I will tell you that I've learned a ton about this work through him, because his DNA came coded for survival. And he comes from generational trauma and generational poverty. And I'll talk about what that looks like on a day-to-day basis, and how we kind of mitigate that and how we work around that, because we have classrooms of kids that come from similar kinds of backgrounds. So you guys ready to dive in? Okay. So tonight we're going to talk about the stress response system, yours and the stress response system of anyone you're working with. We're going to just lightly touch on a few details about the ACEs study. We're going to talk about the science of the brain. A lot of that comes from Dr. Perry. Next week, we'll talk more about resilience building and restorative practices, but it all kind of gets woven in together. So we'll have fun. But to get us started, this is an important practice that I like to do. You all came from different experiences before you showed up here today. So if you would, just, before we do this, first we'll just take 3 breaths. Because one of the things that we know that's really healing to our body and our brain is to bring oxygen in a slow, calm way. So I just want to invite each of you to take 3 deep breaths just where you're sitting. Doesn't that feel so much better? All right, so now you get to do this fun thing where either with one other person or if you're in a group of 3 and everybody remotely, please do this as well. What's the best thing in the last couple weeks that happened for you, personal or professional? Something that filled you with joy.
So I started I'm grandma. So no wonder you're not teaching your back. Like I talked about, Not available. The best thing that has happened for me in the last
We'll take about 1 more minute. About 1 more minute. All right, we're going to go ahead and come on back. We'll finish up our conversations. Okay, the next time we break, if you didn't get to talk, then make sure that that person gets to talk, okay? Ideally, we do this, and it's supposed to be 2 people, so it's just 1 minute, 1 minute. So, but you guys are a family over there. You wanted to bring it all in, bring it in. There's a reason that we do that, and it's so funny because I was working with some of our ROP students, and this was a practice that their teacher was doing, and I forgot about it. It was on the board, but I just got right into my little mini lesson, and one of the boys in the back raised his hand, this junior in high school, and said, actually, so see, Mrs. Rizzi, we always do tell me something good before we get started, and we didn't do that yet. Because kids know how differently they feel when they stop what they're doing, get in their body, and focus on something that brought them joy. And then you do this relationally safe thing by talking to somebody near you, and now you've just shared something good and you feel that you've been heard and that you have a voice. It's a very powerful practice, and it doesn't take very much time. So it comes from a training called Capturing Kids' Hearts. A lot of teachers have been trained in that. So in this slide deck, for people that are tuning in remotely, we aren't going to watch any of these videos tonight, but I left them in anyways because I wanted you to have access to them. I sent the slide deck electronically, so hopefully it can be sent out to everyone electronically, so you can just go and click on the videos. I'm just going to give you a quick blurb of what you'll benefit from if you watch the videos that are referenced here tonight, this afternoon. This is a video that it's the 3rd in a series from Harvard, and I use it with parents. Sometimes when I'm doing a parent training, we do ACEs parents evenings. It's only 2 minutes, but it basically talks about how the brain wires up during those early years of development. And when you are repeatedly exposed to toxic stress and trauma, how the part of the brain responsible for learning and higher order level thinking and taking the perspective of another in the prefrontal cortex area doesn't get wired up the same way that it does if you live in a normalized kind of environment. The part of the brain that gets triggered is the amygdala, the fear response center. So when they do a brain scan on kids, and I'm kind of going over what the video says, but the video lays the foundation for that. It just talks scientifically about how the brain wires up, and how if you've been in an environment where there's been repeated triggering of the stress response system, how they do brain scans and see oversized amygdalas in individuals who have come from homes of that kind. So it's important for us to know that the implications of that are huge, because when we have young people that are working in our school systems and they demonstrate with weaknesses and inabilities to do these kinds of things we just talked about, it's helpful to understand and to keep that into perspective so that we offer them compassion and not frustration, because they really are coming to us not wired up in the same way. And there are things that we can do about that. So then that's where the next step is, where we talk to parents about, here are some things we can do in the home for you to stay regulated so that you can help your child stay regulated in the home and in the school. I will tell you that this work has completely changed who I am as a parent, because I have a very strong-willed little boy, and he is determined to have his way. And I mean to tell you, I flip my lid on a regular basis with him, and I use everything that we're going to talk about this afternoon just to keep myself regulated. So these are lifelong kinds of tools. One thing that happens when you're a part of the Trauma Academy with Dr. Perry, they do an international symposium every 2 years, and Dr. Perry loves to be in the outdoors and hike, so he holds it in Banff, Canada. Such a tragedy. So beautiful there. Well, last June when I was there, one of the doctors was talking about a study they conducted across the United States with prison inmates. And what they found when they went into these prisons was that over 50% of prison inmates had been identified in preschool and in kindergarten age as being hyperactive and or ADHD. And what they link that back to is, if you look at our nation and you consider the fact that the largest form of abuse is neglect in our nation, believe it or not, and you picture, and in that Harvard video, it shows a baby crying in a crib, and no caregiver comes to attune that child or to calm those fears. The wiring of the brain happens in a very different way when you are experiencing inconsistent care from a caregiver. Sometimes they come, sometimes they don't. What happens is, when I go pick up Xavier, or when you go pick up any of your children and you rock them, it's called attunement. Every cell in my body is teaching every cell in his body how to self-regulate. If he's not experiencing that on a regular basis, the wiring, it gets kind of haywired. It doesn't wire up the way that it should, so that he has automaticity with self-regulating. They also link it to the kind of language that occurs in homes where there's toxic stress and chronic abuse, where there are way more objections than there are affirmations. They also link it to the actual actions of the parents, that the parents will say they're going to do something and then there isn't follow through. They're pretty black and white about no with kids, and what they have found is that a lot of these kids enter the school system with this work avoidance. They won't persevere in a task because they don't believe that they can complete it. It stems back to these early experiences in the first couple of years of their lives with the way their parents interacted with them and actually spoke with them. So it's huge. The biggest goal here is to get to the parents that are raising these babies. We want to work with those mamas that are pregnant so that we help them understand the implications of the early things that happen for their kids. So we know that we have children that come into our schools who do not have the ability to self-regulation, of self-regulating. It's not an achievement gap, it's a regulation gap. So what I'm going to talk to you about next is what we do preschool through 12th grade to help children understand how to be calm in their body, in their skin. I know in Lake County, as well as in Shasta County, where I come from, there are really high rates of individuals who are addicted to methamphetamine, heroin, high levels of domestic violence. People in my area die approximately 20 years earlier than they should because of the toxic stress and the kinds of trauma that occurs in the homes. So what we do is we educate kids, and then we ask them to go home and tell someone in their home what it was that works best for them and what they are applying in their own lives. I work in the juvenile hall in Shasta County with the teachers and with the youth. And I'll tell you, last week when the youth, there are two different groups, the higher risk offenders and then the lower risk offenders. And they take a break. So I was just kind of going from table to table, hanging out with the kids, and I was sharing this mini lesson with some of them. I'm not even kidding you. One girl took out a piece of paper and a pen and started taking notes, because she could hear what I was saying, and she could understand that this is how you get control of your life and of yourself. So this is why and this comes from Dr. Dan Siegel, by the way. Dr. Dan Siegel co-authored a book called Parenting from the Inside Out. Anybody familiar with that book? I highly recommend it. It doesn't matter if you have children who are 3 like me or if they're 30. That book is life-changing, because one of the things that Dr. Siegel talks about is, and you can just kind of self-reflect on your own with this. If your child, or if there's a student in your class or on your school campus who is repeatedly triggering you because of a particular behavior, what he talks about is you can usually go back into your own childhood and identify something that happened in your childhood that's not really been resolved as a way of linking and making sense of why that behavior is triggering for you. I was with a group of behavior techs a couple weeks ago, and I talked about that. They work at a community day school in my area, and this sweet, sweet young man came up to me afterwards and he said, I have to tell you that that piece of information was life-changing for me. I come from trauma, and I work with these kids because I get it, and I want to change their lives, and I want to make a difference. He said, but I go home at the end of the day so triggered by them, and there are certain things that happen that really I feel like disable me throughout the day. And he said, as soon as you said that, I was like, ding, ding, ding. I could like put my finger on what it is. The brain is a pattern seeker. If you can make sense of what it is that's happening to you and around you, you can usually address it, resolve it, and heal it and move past it. So that's part of the work that we're talking about doing here. So this is Dan Siegel's flipped lid model, and if you guys have spent time with me before, you're familiar with it, but it basically goes like this. We go into classrooms and talk to kids about how school could be easier for them, how life could be easier for them. So if you take out your fist, because this is the model of your brain, and you wiggle your fingers, this is your upstairs brain, this is your downstairs brain, and your thumb represents your amygdala. So here's how it works. You're walking along, you're having a great day, and you're feeling good, and then somebody calls you a name and insults you. It doesn't make any sense, and it hurts your feelings, and it makes you feel kind of angry, and then you're embarrassed, and then you're sad, and you have this flood of emotions. You flip your lid. And when you flip your lid, you immediately drop into the lower regions of your brain, down into your brainstem, your reptilian brain. We tell kids, we just keep it simple, downstairs brain. So upstairs brain, downstairs brain. When you have a strong emotion and your amygdala, your fear response center is triggered, you drop into your downstairs brain. Think about the last time you were running late in the morning and you couldn't find your car keys, right? That was a flip lid moment for you. You were stressed, you were feeling frustrated. Your keys probably were in a pretty common sense location, but you didn't have access to that information because you were down here freaking out about that appointment you were going to be late to, or for that, right? Or if you ever go to a grocery store in your community and somebody's approaching you and you think to yourself, what is her name? Oh, I think I know her name. What is her name? Crap, what is her name? You literally, then you don't have access to her name because you just dropped down here. And you're like, I know her name, but I just can't access it right now. If you slow down, if you take some breaths, what we talk to kids about is, this happens to all of us. The good news is we now know how to get our lids back on so that we don't feel out of control. One of the reasons the kids in juvenile hall were so interested in this is because they're all in there. They feel very out of control in their lives. They're being held and they're being made to live in a locked facility because of an action, because of a decision they made when they had a flipped lid moment. Does that make sense? They want to know how to get that lid back on so they don't keep having to get, sent to a place where you're forced to live and breathe and eat and all of that. So what we do is we teach them about their body. We teach them about these 4 basic physiological elements of their body. And if you're from the school system and you've been in on student study team meetings and IEP meetings, there's usually somebody that says, well, I'm working with them on breathing. And I used to get frustrated by that because no one ever explained the science of that to me. Why are you working with them on breathing? And then after going through all my formal training, I learned the science of it. Oh, your brain and body knows the difference between when you have a flipped lid and when you don't. And when you have a flipped lid, your breathing is very different. Your body is, you're in fight, flight, freeze mode. You're ready to go at any moment to protect yourself if you have to. It's a beautiful self-defense mechanism that's built into us. But when we slow our breathing intentionally, it sends a chemical message to the brain. You're safe. You can relax. I have a girlfriend who cannot get on an airplane unless she ducks into one of those rooms and does a systematic way of breathing just to calm her body down, her stress response system down, so her claustrophobia doesn't take over, right? So one of the things that and by the way, this is so funny. A couple of years ago, I was in Crescent City, and I was doing this mini lesson with some second graders, and this little boy raised his hand and said, so that's like when you flip your lid, that's like you lost internet connectivity, right? And like you're offline. was like, yeah, that's brilliant. It's very much what it's like. What's interesting is when you have a flip lid moment, it's also very difficult to learn any new concept that's going to like be stored up there in the higher levels of the brain. So learning anything new, retrieving anything that you've learned prior to that moment is very difficult. So the first thing that we do is we talk to kids about breathing. So this is a Hoberman's sphere, or you can call it a breathing ball. But I take it in because it's a great visual, and then I usually have one in all of the cool down corners in the classrooms where I work. We talk to kids about intentional breathing, that we breathe in through our nose and we intend the breath into the belly. Watch my shoulders. I'm going to do shallow breathing and you'll see the difference. That's into my chest. You'll see my shoulders drop, right? Now, belly breathing is very different. It's a very different experience. We drop the jaw on the out breath because we hold a lot of our stress in our jaw. And if you can relax your jaw, it helps to release that stress. With younger kids, I can usually get them to Darth Vader breathe with me. On the out breath, it's usually like this. And I'll teach you a brain break tonight that's a fun one where you get to actually make a vocalization as you're on the out breath. It's called the blowout. But so we use this as a visual to teach them, and then we teach them about breathing. So once we feel like they've got a handle on that, we do hand breathing. So the idea is this, and you know, the hand is a scaffold. There are hundreds of ways to do breathing. This is just one way. But we teach them, you breathe into your belly for the count of 2. You hold the breath in your belly for the count of 2. You breathe out for the count of 2. You hold it for the count of 2. So like in community day school classrooms where I work, we actually build up to do 4 count breathing. You have to work up to that. But for tonight, we're just talking about breathe in for the count of 2, hold it for the count of 2, breathe out for the count of 2, and hold it for the count of 2. That's one breath. So we're going to do 5 of them. You ready? Kids actually love this because it helps them to learn the practice of intending the breath into the belly and slowing down that whole process. So here we go. Do some hand breathing. And then just notice how you're feeling. I had a 7th grade girl say to me, I'm so tired, I think I want to take a nap. And I kind of got panicked a little, and I said, oh no, I'm putting them to sleep. But the truth is, if somebody thinks they can take a nap, they are definitely not having a flip lid moment. They are definitely in a place where they're feeling safe. And then I will just tell them, sit down, do finger push-ups if you need to wake yourself up. Rub. There's a program called School Moves. It's all about cross-lateral work. These are called brain buttons. SCOOL, School Moves. Very research-based. And we'll get to that when we talk about cross-lateral. But I will tell them, if you find your collarbone and you go down about 1 inch, you'll feel indentations. Technically, they're called meridian points, but tons of energy goes through those points. So if I'm at a training and it's a sit and get, you'll see me rubbing my brain buttons to wake myself back up so I don't fall asleep. But that's something that I have kids do. And we'll talk about tapping, because tapping is related to the meridian points also. So that's breathing. Then we talk to them about heartbeat. And this is a great one, because we all started our lives with a common experience. We all hung out in the bellies of our mamas for about 9 months, give or take. And while we were there, we heard that common sound. And it is so powerful to understand the power that initial sound has on us now as adults. Yeah.
My husband was just telling me that he read an article that was saying your verbal abilities go down if you're listening to music but if you're listening to like a noise, like a heartbeat noise,
Uh-huh.
or just like a, a filtering noise, it doesn't affect the verbal abilities verbally. I thought that was so interesting.
So let me just make sure I'm understanding what you said, and then the people that are remoting in can hear. So you were saying that your husband read an article about how if you are listening to music, your verbal ability goes down because there are words that you're hearing.
And even if it's non-word music,
Oh, no.
he said even if it doesn't have lyrics.
Okay. Your verbal
Ability.
expressive language goes
Yes.
down. However, if you're listening to something that's more like just a plain heartbeat,
Yeah, or like any kind of a noise filter. That's
like white noise,
Yeah.
then your verbal ability goes up. Interesting.
Or it doesn't affect it.
Doesn't affect it. Okay.
decrease
It just stays
He was
neutral.
just thinking about me using it in the classroom.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
just the other
Yeah.
day, I realized I had on myself like a white noise thing,
Uh-huh.
sound screen.
Yeah.
So I just plugged it in. I kept it in the back. I just
Uh-huh.
kept it on.
Interesting.
So I don't know.
I'd be curious to see what you find with that.
Yeah.
So she was saying that she has a white noise machine, so she plugged it in her classroom just to see if that would impact language ability. Or so cool experiment. What we know is that we can use the heartbeat, and I'll tell you, I use it in my own life to down-regulate our system, because it is a very calming experience for the physiology of our body. So, I mean, anything from rocking. Sometimes if I'm feeling like, I caught myself a few weeks ago, I was attending a training and I was having a little bit of anxiety over something they were saying. I was in the back of the room doing this, right? You notice that when you're rocking a baby, if I'm sitting here holding a baby and I'm rocking them, and if you're standing across from me, a lot of times you'll start rocking with me. It's a very contagious, and we'll talk about our mirror neurons, but any kind of rocking motion, any kind of drumming, like we have kids that will do this with their pen, because believe it or not, that's the heartbeat. Whether it's fast or whether it's slow, they're actually self-regulating. You want to give them a replacement activity so that they can do what it is that they're doing, so they don't become a behavior. I give them Q-tips, or we get creative and we get a stick and we like tape something heavy to the end of it that's kind of got a thudding noise, so it's not going to distract people in the room. I was with some high school teachers, and the shop teacher said to me, I tap. He said, I tap my foot. I had a pretty traumatic childhood, and it never occurred to me that I was self-regulating. Makes my wife crazy when we're at the movie theater. But that is one of the things that he does to self-regulate. That's the heartbeat. Any kind of music that you play, all music has those neural patterns, that rocking, that heartbeat. For Christmas, I asked my husband was like, what do you want for Christmas? You need to practice more self-care, Kelly Rizzi. I'm like, I know, I want a hammock. So I asked for this beautiful hammock. So this hammock arrives from Amazon, and it is gorgeous. And because that rocking motion mimics that heartbeat. So I go and rock in my hammock, and I sit outside and I listen to the birds as a form of self-care to regulate my system and calm myself down. At Thanksgiving, I was with some stressful relatives. I don't know if any of you had the similar experience that I did, but they were like, Kelly, come play cards. And I said, okay. And I went and sat down, and I'm having like this anxiety in my chest. And I sat down in one of those chairs. It was outdoor furniture, but it was a rocking chair. I was like, oh, this is brilliant. Knowing what I know, I rocked and I did my breathing, and I was good. I was completely good. I sent them love and compassion the whole time, and I could tolerate, like I could dose myself with that amount of stress because I was down regulating my system using my breathing and my heartbeat, natural elements of my body. Does that make sense? That's how you can use this, like tonight when you leave here and you go home. You can use this in all aspects of your life. So the next one, okay, so heartbeat. Here's one that this is simple. We do this in classrooms. If I'm working with a class that knows this, I just start to do this clapping sequence, and then they join in with me. And it's a way to just reset everybody at the same time. In juvenile hall, we don't call these brain breaks. We call them reset. We need a reset. Because for some kids that are older, it's better just to say it's a reset, because we are. It's really literally what we're doing. We're going to reset. And is it getting warm in here? You guys getting sleepy? Just want to make sure you're all comfortable, because, by the way, when you are triggered, everything at a brainstem level is sensory. That's the first thing that happens. What do you see? What do you hear? What do you taste? What do you touch? That's all sensory. That all impacts whether or not you're able to remain regulated or not. I usually turn off half the lights in every classroom that I go into because I'm overstimulated by too many lights. I forgot to do that today, but we're okay. So there we go. Ha. So your temperature, your body temperature is one of those. If you're hungry, if you have to go to the bathroom, it's going to be very difficult to stay regulated. So heartbeat. One of the ways we do heartbeat with the kids is I made up this clapping sequence, but then I give it over to them. We always do it for about 2 weeks because the brain loves anything that's familiar. It's safe. So this is a very simple clapping pattern. You can do it sitting down. Clap, 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 stomp, stomp, clap. Try that with me. We'll do it 5 times. You guys too remotely. Clap, 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 stomp, clap. Feel the rhythm of that. We'll do it one more time. All right, so I do that, and then I've got everybody back with me again, and then I just reset the whole class all at once. I'm getting over a cold, and I thought it would be a great self-care thing to get braces in my 40s. I don't know what I was thinking, but you have a very dry mouth when you have braces, so thank you for being patient with me drinking and putting chapstick on. So the kids love this because then they will come up with really cool clapping sequences, and they'll have things like this that then they teach the class, and then you do theirs for 2 weeks. Drumming is a very powerful. The Trauma Academy recommends anything that's rhythmic, regulatory, anything that offers that opportunity to have those resonant internal heartbeat experience in the body. So the third one that we talk about is anything that's cross-lateral. We know that the right side of the brain controls the left side of the body and vice versa. And anytime that you cross over the midline with your body in any way, you help to connect the right and left hemisphere, and you calm the amygdala. So it's interesting, a teacher that I'm coaching, she teaches 3rd grade, and she wanted to incorporate this into her PE program. So she said, the first day that I introduce it, Kelly, I want you to be there to observe how the kids respond. So one of the first things she was having them do is a move called the cross crawl, and it comes from what I talked about, school moves. So the cross crawl is just, putting your elbow to your opposite knee, right? What I saw with probably, she's got a class of 30, probably at least 5 of her kids were doing this. They didn't even know they weren't crossing over the midline because their their awareness is so underdeveloped. Yeah. So this cross-lateral movement, there's a ton of science behind it, is a very important way of helping to reorganize the brain internally by doing things externally throughout the day, throughout your time with students that you're working with.
Like jumping jacks, that's the first one.
Yes.
A lot of my kids do
Those
not.
gross motor. Yeah. A great book that I'm reading right now, it's called The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. And he talks about, gosh, I think it's him. Shoot. Or maybe it's the book that I read just before that. Anyways, I read so many books, but I'm going to give you the example anyways because it was so compelling to me. His job early on in his career was to work with veterans, Vietnam veterans who came back from the war, to re-socialize them because they had isolated themselves because they had experienced such trauma. And what he noticed was his job was to get them out to play basketball, go do social things, go to the beach, play games. And what he noticed was that they had really delayed gross motor skills, like these guys that had been basketball players in high school. But the way that the trauma had affected the neurology, it's like it almost sent them backward in their gross motor skill, their ability to be coordinated, if you will. And I read that and thought, that is so fascinating to me because trauma affects all kinds of hardwiring in the brain. The great news is the brain is elastic. You can heal it, you can address it, you can get all that back. But that was just one of his observations. So cross-lateral movement is a big deal. A woman that, gosh, I think I met her a year ago. She was at one of my trainings. She said, Kelly, she said, I adopted my daughter from China when she was 4 years old. So she spent the first 4 years of her life in an orphanage. And she said, we go to the gymnastics studio and she tries to walk the balance beam. She gets one step and she falls off because her, your vestibular canal runs between your ears. Your vestibular canal is your balance, your coordination, your, equilibrium. If you're not rocked and if you're not moved, if your vestibular canal is not brought online during those early stages, it's not stimulated. And so you'll see kids, and if you see a kid like this, it doesn't necessarily mean they were neglected, but it is one of the reasons for that you see. This teacher that I'm coaching happens to come from an area where there's a lot of neglect. So I'm assuming that at least for a portion of her class, that's why. So we just rewired the brain. We reorganized the brain by giving them the opportunity to do those kinds of movements. This first appeared to me about 5 years ago because I was doing something with a little girl, and she said, "That doesn't feel good to me, Mrs. Rizzi. That causes me to feel stress." And I thought, oh, well, I don't want you to do it if it's stressing you out. But the reality is she hadn't built the pathways in her frontal lobe for it to feel good or for there to be automaticity for her. So I always say, will you be willing to do a 2-week experiment with me? And typically within 2 or 3 weeks of them, at least 3 or 4 times a day, doing cross-lateral movements, it'll feel more natural-like to them, and they'll have that experience where it actually helps to calm them down. Does that make sense? I know, it's crazy how the brain works. The last one is isometrics. And, you know, anytime you apply pressure, your own strength, wall push-ups at all, is a really powerful way of down-regulating your system. So one that we teach kids, and I'll have you guys stand up to do this one. I'm not going to make you get down and do 20. No. This one is great, the Jedi. I named it the Jedi. That's not what the woman called it at the training I attended, but I work in schools. So if I'm with smaller children, sometimes it's the sea otter, sometimes it's the Jedi. If I'm with high schoolers, we call it the double clap. It's great because you can do all of it, or you can just do one part of it. If you just need to like infuse a quick 1-minute brain break with kids that are feeling kind of amped up, you can do this. But why don't we stand up, because you guys have been sitting for a while. Gosh, almost for an hour. Shoot. I love this one because you do, it feels good to your body, but you're using breathing and you're using isometrics. So it starts with, you're going to clap, you're going to stretch back, feel this nice stretch. Oh, and then you're going to clap right on the midline twice. That. And now you're going to pull apart. When you're in this pose of pulling on your own strength, against your own strength, you're going to do those two breaths like we did earlier on the count of, for the count of 2. Here we go, 2 breaths. Now we're going to press. Same thing, 2 breaths. This is where you all look like Jedi Knights. He didn't know you were coming to a yoga class. She's coming in. All right, so then you drop your arms, and this is my favorite part of the Jedi. We're going to blow up an imaginary balloon, so just kind of get a color in your mind of what color the balloon is you're going to blow up. And your arms are going to go up, up, up as the balloon gets full, and you're going to hold it, and then you're going to drop. When you do, drop down and just let all the stress drip right out. Relax, take a breath, and then you'll stand back up again, okay? So here we go to our last cleansing breath. And release. Sorry if that's heavy breathing for the people remoting in. I just thought of that. And then you end with two claps on the midline. And then have a seat. So how are we feeling? You guys came in an hour ago. Would you like to take a 5-minute formal break? Do you want to keep going? 5-minute. Okay, so people remotely joining us, we're going to take a 5-minute bio break, and then we'll come back. So we'll come back at 4:30. Right. Frustration towards, I do a lot of self-talk. So it sounds something like this. It's not what's wrong with her, it's what happened to her. If she had the tools to be the best mom in the world, that's how she'd show up. Something went wrong in her childhood, that she did not come equipped with the understanding of what she needs to do to be a good mom, and what she needs is support and understanding. And now when I go in and I enter into a meeting with someone, they feel compassion from me. They feel supported from me. They feel that I'm a collaborator on their side, because I really authentically am, because I've talked myself into it before I have go and meet with them. And then when I talk myself into it, then I actually really feel that way. Just experiment with this. It's kind of a big deal. It's also a big deal because if you're a classroom teacher and you're having a bad day and you're trying to fake it in front of your students, really bad idea. Because if you're smiling, but you're really frustrated, you're sending a very mixed message to your kids. You're all of a sudden a very untrustworthy adult. If you're smiling, but what they're feeling from you, because they've scientifically proven it's within 10 or 11 feet, you will feel the intentions of the person that you are approaching. So if you are with a group of young people and you want your day to go well, it's important to practice self-care. Getting enough sleep at night, taking care of yourself, doing things that feed your soul outside of work and inside of work, and figuring out a way to regulate yourself. For me, I visualize that I'm in a place where it's snowing, because snow is so quiet and peaceful. I'm in front of a fire, so it's not cold. And I visualize that, and I do my breathing to downregulate my system so that I'm not a contagion. And I will admit to you guys, a couple months ago, I got it wrong on my calendar that I was supposed to be in a classroom of a teacher that I'm coaching, and I showed up 10 minutes late, and they're all waiting for me. All these sixth graders are waiting for me, and I was so angry at myself, and I was so embarrassed that I had made this stupid mistake. It was an awful, let me just tell you, probably one of my worst experiences in a classroom in the last 6 years, because I tried to teach a lesson, but I was so contagious. The kids could feel my dysregulation. There were boys that were trying to be disrespectful to me, which would have never happened before. So I'm just telling you, pay attention to your own inner thermometer, your own inner regulation, and notice how it affects and impacts the people around you. Very powerful. Because if you do have a flipped lid, you're down here. You have very little access to your thinking brain or even your emotion brain. So it's really important to, and it's funny, I was in Napa and I was talking about this, and this tall man, he was an administrator. It was compelling. He stood up and he said, "So Kelly, what you're implying is that each of us has the natural ability to self-reflect." I went, "Yeah, I guess I am implying that." And he said, "I've had to work 2 years. The last 2 years, I have really done work around being able to self-reflect, because it doesn't come naturally to everyone. So if that's you, here's the good news. The brain is elastic. All it takes is you putting a focus on that, and you will grow that part of your brain. If you want to be better at self-reflecting of your own inner thermometer and how you present and how contagious you are to those who you are around." So, but I'm going to ask you, actually, yeah, let's do this. And then when you come back from talking, I want to know what you do. So it would be great if you could sit with one other person, or 3 other people, but so that and this time you're going to get to, the person that didn't get to talk last time, now they're going to, yeah, she's going to talk about her good thing. So we'll do this for about 4 minutes or so. I'll set a timer and then we'll come back. What do you do and what do you recommend? All right, we'll come back in about 4 minutes. 4 minutes. About 30 more seconds and we'll come back. All right, we're going to bring our conversations to a close. We're going to come on back. And is anyone comfortable, at least people here in this room, is anyone comfortable sharing something you heard your neighbor say or something that you do that you would recommend? Awesome. Okay. Oh, good. We've got a microphone. Yay. All right. Yeah, great. That'd be good.
My name is Israel, and a strategy that I use is one that's been embedded in me for a while. I was a vocal major at one point, so I say the art of breathing is one that's been instilled in me since then. We were breathing to the diaphragm, and I was taught to relax my jaw. So like those things is instinctual. So for me right now, that is what I fall to immediately. I also listen to music.
Beautiful.
And yes, I love music.
Yeah, I know.
Well, it was only like if you're trying to do work.
Oh.
Because music reorganizes the brain. So if you're doing it when you're not trying to like do something else, it doesn't affect your verbal abilities.
Well,
and what I think, but some people have to listen to music to do work. So it's like it's the wiring of your brain, right?
Yeah.
And I think, again, it has something to do with the fact that I was a music major and vocal performance was what I
no doubt.
emphasized in. I recommend the breathing only because I know it works.
Yes.
You can listen to music. I know music has a tendency to warp your brain in a way. For example, if you're listening to, like, let's say heavy metal music, you might be more amped up and it'll take you away from
music can take you up and bring you down.
And bring you down, yeah.
Yep.
So
Depends
if I
on what you
would
want.
recommend music, I would recommend calming music. But that's just that. Okay, I'm done.
All right, well, thank you. Anybody else willing to share? Oh.
We have some comments from online.
Oh, great. Can we? Thank you.
We had some comments from the online audience that I thought were very helpful. Vicki Baldwin from Del Norte says that she teaches TK classrooms and they use the Dinah Dinosaur program puppets to calm down in the classroom, but also using the 3 deep breaths like yours.
Great. So the Dinah Dinosaur program?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I love to write new ideas down. Dinah Dinosaur.
Yes. And then another one of our online participants teaches clients to do easy math in their heads to engage the frontal cortex.
Oh, good for focusing.
Yeah,
Nice.
Good for focusing, or name everything that they can see or colors that they can see, giving them something to focus on, engaging the Broca's area of the brain, and tricking the lid to stop being flipped. Through the engagement of the frontal cortex.
Perfect. Ooh, I like that.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you, people. Thank you, everyone, for sharing. Everybody that's remotely tuning in and everybody in the room. Thank you. Anything else that you heard somebody say or that you are comfortable sharing? Okay. Well, I want to tell you the last time I was here, I don't know when, maybe it was, I know exactly when it was here. I was here on July 26th. Because my city burned while I was here that night. Yeah, it was a horrible, horrible night. But I was here. I spent the night here the 26th. July 27th was the day that I spent with folks here in this room. And there was a fabulous teacher who taught me about flow rings. I put it right here so that you would be able to remember what it's called. I just Googled arm slinky, and it came up on Amazon. And basically, it is a sensory delight. It allows for a sensory experience for children, but it's also nice because it's kind of a cross-lateral. You go from right to left. So we put these in calming corners in our rooms, or if you have a sensory room, this is a nice object to have there. I'll pass it around so you can experience it. It's amazing. If you get it and it's looking like this, like a pumpkin, you just press down and twist to get it to go back. And I recommend, so I ordered, I think mine came in a 2-pack on Amazon. They were $6 each, so they're very affordable. But I did buy one at a holiday market that was pretty cheap, and after being with 100 teachers that day, it came back all bent and broken. So it's worth spending at least $6 on them, but I'll pass it around. It's a wonderful, kids love these. But then something else that I picked up, if you've heard of Heather Forbes, she wrote the book Help for Billy. She held a trauma conference in Sacramento in the fall, right when school started, and I met these women who started this company called Capeable because they make weighted lap blankets. They make capes that are absolutely gorgeous. They use really rich, beautiful material. There were men at the conference walking around with these beautiful like shawls, but they were weighted. It's a great way for kids to feel grounded. This one is it has magnets sewn into it. They were telling me that when they have kids, like when we do restorative circles, sometimes this will be the talking piece, because if a child, especially if it's a repairing harm kind of a restorative circle, I'll use this because sometimes it's difficult for kids to vocalize what it is that's going on for them if it's an emotion that they're expressing. And this fabric is so soft and it's weighted, and they can sit and hold it and they can fidget with it while they are sharing. And it's this amazing thing that happens when you allow them that opportunity. So I'll pass this around too. And then the other thing, I think I have this as a slide. Yeah. So I should probably take part of the profit on this. I talk about it so much. I really don't work for these people. The only reason that I advocate this book is because Josh is also trained through the Trauma Academy, and everything that he does in this book is the neurosequential model of education. It's very biologically respectful, and it's easy and he divides it into 3 categories: calming brain breaks, energizing brain breaks, and focusing brain breaks. So depending upon what your kids need, some classrooms have like 3 jars. One's labeled calming, one's energizing, one's focusing, and they have popsicle sticks in them. And once they've taught the kids the brain breaks or reset strategies, whatever you want to call them, they'll have a student pull a popsicle stick from the jar, and the whole class will do that brain break. And about every 30 minutes, because some kids will disassociate as their way of being triggered. Some become hyper aroused, and the ones that disassociate usually don't realize that that's what's happening to them. And then they come back in, they realize they just missed half the lesson, and then they sometimes get hyper aroused because they realize they didn't hear anything you just said, and now they're stressed out that they didn't get the lesson. So we systematically, about every 30 minutes, do some kind of a brain break, depending on what the need is in the class. So like one of the focusing ones, I think it's in one of the slides, is the thumb pinky switch. Like you were talking, the person who shared talked about doing the mental math to get them engaged, that frontal lobe. The thumb pinky switch is one of the focusing ones. So you put your thumb up on one hand and your pinky on the other, and then you switch. It's one of those things where you stick your tongue out. But the funny thing is, the more you practice it, the better you get at it. It causes you to get back in your body and focus. So anyways, those are some great ideas, and they're easy. They're like a short paragraph each. All right. So anything else before, now we're going to transition into talking just a little bit about the science of the ACEs study. Anything else on self-regulation, tips, anything before we move on?
Well, I have a quick feel-good story.
Oh, good.
Students
Yay.
who needed some self-regulation time. It was about 3 or 4 months ago, and the night before, she'd been taken into foster care. So
Oh, wow.
The next day, she was having a really,
This is just a kind of a feel-good story about self-regulation and how really the brains are so elastic. So she came into my room after lunch instead
And
of
you
going
teach
to
first grade.
recess. I teach special education.
Oh, okay.
So she happens to be in first grade.
Okay.
So she came into my room after lunch instead of going to recess, and just little things that she'd been coming in already, not really because she needed academic help, but because she needed attention and she needed sensory break. So the brain loves anything that's familiar. So she would go to the refrigerator. She would get her little water bottle that I kept in my fridge with her name on it. And then she'd go in the Zen zone, and whatever she needed, we tried to do. A lot of times she needed calm down time. And so that day, she noticed I had a little pack of graham crackers on my desk, and she asked me if she could have them because she said she was hungry. I said, yeah, of course. You can have these and have your water. And, do you want to play with the pillow, the sensory pillow where you rub back and forth on the sequence? Anyway, she had her I could tell she was just really loving it that day, just really calming. And we played the music. Oh, yeah, that's right. I play music for her, and she listens to it with the headphones. And she sits in the concentration rocker, and she just looks at books.
Nice.
And she listens to the music. She drinks her water. It's just totally calming.
Doesn't everyone need that?
I mean,
I need that.
That day it was just really working for her. But this is what is so amazing. When she left, it was only like half an hour. And when it was time for my older kids to come in at 12:25, I'm like, okay, your time is up. It's time to go. She was like, okay. And I think she had come in before lunch. Okay, so it was like 11:45. Anyway, it was time. And she said, when she left, she said, now, Mrs. Robert, remember to eat when we eat, so you won't be hungry later on.
Oh, interesting.
And I thought that was so amazing and so profound, because I have never had a student ever who cared whether I ate or not, who thought about whether I would be hungry or not if I didn't eat. And see, she already knew that sometimes I skipped lunch because I'm looking around like a maniac. And for whatever reason that day, when she left, she chose to say that. And that just shows how much they can empathize if we show them the empathy that they need.
Becomes reciprocal.
And I don't always succeed like that as a teacher. Most of the time I don't. But anyway, that was a really great day. That was a good takeaway.
That's a great example. Thank you. And you will find that a lot of kids from trauma are acutely aware of the caregiver's needs, because if the caregiver's needs are met, then they're okay and nothing bad's going to happen. So they do typically have a very different lens than other kids. They're also the ones who focus more on your voice intonation and on your body proximity than they do on the actual words that you're saying, because in their homes, they've learned that the words that adults speak don't hold a lot of weight and there isn't a lot of follow through. So they're the ones that if you curl your hair differently one day, they'll be the ones to spot it and call it out because they study you. It's what their DNA has taught them to do. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So speaking of DNA, these are the 10 ACEs, and I know that most everyone is familiar with the study. One of the things that we've learned that maybe you know, maybe you don't, but these 10 adverse childhood experiences are just the 10 that they included in the study that was done down in Kaiser. We could stand here today and make a whole additional list of adverse childhood experiences that happened in our lives or that could have happened in our lives. So I just try to help people know that this is a very subjective study, that, for me, I'm a 6 or a 7 on this rating scale, but then you have to consider other things that happened. So it's a very powerful study. Epidemiologists are calling this the largest public health epidemic in the history of the United States, because they have discovered that this is what is at the hub of all the other health issues that we are facing in our communities. Obesity, heart disease, the list goes on. People's inability to show up to work, the high rates of anxiety and depression that are being treated by pharmaceutical companies around the United States. They see this as the hub, so that if we could go and educate people about this, that they would be able to get control of their lives if they understood the science of it. So a couple of the things that the ACE interface believes is that we have the ability to develop self-healing communities. And the other belief is that a rising tide lifts all vessels. which I love, because what we have found is that we've gone into neighborhoods and we've gone into our communities, and we have identified people who do have a voice, who do have the ability to take on a leadership role, and we have sort of breathed confidence into them and brought them into this movement. And now they're going out and telling people about the ACEs study. And, you know, I mean, like each of you in this room is a committed, like each person tuning in tonight, I mean, who at the end of their workday, right, comes for 2 hours to learn more about how they can change lives? People like you who are here. You are leaders in your community. You are change agents. That's why you're here. You want to make a difference. We're looking at people who don't yet believe that about themselves. And when we give them permission to believe in themselves in that way, they take on a different role in their neighborhoods. After working with a mom for a while, I was riding the school bus one morning because there was a difficult child on the bus and the bus driver wanted my help. And I saw her out picking up garbage on her street at 7 in the morning because she wanted the children to wake up and see their street clean in the morning, even though the teenagers had trashed it the night before. Like that was one of her commitments because she believes that kids need to wake up and see that their neighborhood where they live is clean. So it's things like that that you can do, little things that really start to make a difference. So one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about in regards to the ACEs study is DNA, because this has been such a huge aha to me and a game changer for me. I got to spend the day with Danny and Kathleen Schenk. They work for the Strategy Center at Youth for Change. They talked about a study that has just like newly been released within the last year from UC Santa Cruz, where they studied not only DNA, but the male sex cell. And the fact that there's a protein that covers a part of the cell, it's like a knob, they call it a histone. You can turn it on or off. Addiction is higher in these individuals because the histone can't be turned down. So one of the things they did, and I'm going to use my son as an example, he has a highly addictive personality. He's very addicted to things. I mean, we really literally can't let him have any more than 30 minutes of screen time at a time. He can't be on the iPad during work days because it is literally like a traumatic event in our home. If my husband or I try to take the iPad away from him, you would think someone split him open in the middle because he's so addicted to it. It already is addictive, but anything at all, like he'll eat a food, he gets addicted to it, he'll just want to eat carrots. And then his body will have an allergic reaction to carrots. He can't eat them anymore because he just wants to, it's just, so what they found in this study was you take a child from a parent who had trauma in their life. This child has had no trauma, but this child will demonstrate with statistically speaking, high levels of addictive behavior and high risk behavior because of the way their DNA is wired up. Does that make sense? Dr. Anda talked about these Polish immigrants who asked he and Laura Porter to come in and work with them because their children were carrying their fat cells so differently. They went back to, their children were appearing obese, and there was really no reason for that. They went back 2 generations and learned that that group of people had experienced famine. So here, 2 generations later, these children are holding on to their fat cells because their DNA is telling them, hold on to your fat cells so you don't starve. So your ancestors, the more that you understand and learn about your ancestors, the more you're going to understand a lot of your deep held beliefs, a lot of your knee-jerk reactions that you have to things that show up in your life. For me, a lot of negative self-talk that I find in myself, I can trace back to the female side of my mom's side. So I've started interviewing my parents to find out about my relatives and what were their jobs, what were their occupations, what were their hobbies, because it's both the good and the bad of it that is wired, comes coded into our DNA. Xavier, one day we were sitting at a stoplight and he said to me, from the back seat, okay, mommy, it's our turn, go. And I almost put on the gas. I'm like, whoa, baby, it's red, what? And he was indignant, but it's our turn. And just then the light changed green. He had literally been watching all the traffic take turns because one of the things that he came coded with is he is acutely aware of his surroundings. It doesn't matter where we go. He studies where he is. He looks at the people. And if you run into me and he's with me, he will not smile at you. He will not be one of those children in the grocery cart that will look all cute and you'll say, oh, he's so cute. He's like, ugh. Because if you have not been around him at least 3 or 4 times, you're not trustworthy unless proven otherwise. And I'm not saying those are bad things. That will certainly keep him safer in life, but it's a part of how he came wired up. Do you know what I mean? So, you'll see kids that will demonstrate in that way. And a lot of it, like I've seen students come in who come from homes where lying, like habitual lying, has been a way of survival in their lives. And you'll try to break them of it, and it's literally like a hard wiring thing. It's a challenging behavior to deal with. But just to kind of, the thing about the ACEs study, the better we understand ourselves and our own ACEs score, the better we're going to understand the people we work with, right? I included this image of this video because if you haven't watched it, I implore you, watch this TED Talk. Nadine Burke-Harris is one of my modern day heroes. Her book, The Deepest Well, is phenomenal. She talks, I think it's in chapter 14 and in chapter 15, how to heal adult trauma. All of the things that they've done in her center. She's a pediatrician in San Francisco, Bayview, Hunters Point. But when I first watched this video, I was sitting alone in my office. It's probably 5 or 6 years ago. And I was tearful because because she talks about ACEs and she talks about the high likelihood that you're going to have later health impairments because of your childhood experiences. And I was like, great, I'm a 6 or a 7 on that rating scale, not to mention all the others. What does that mean for me? The beautiful news is that your ACEs score does not define you. It informs you, it empowers you, it explains why you might think the way that you do, and then it allows you to make really informed decisions about your life. I got really clear after learning the science of this. I cleaned up my diet, I figured out what worked, what didn't. I figured out who I had as friends in my inner circle that were really toxic to me. I love them and support them, but they're not in my inner circle anymore. I've taken a step into a safe place, and I can count on one hand the people that are in my inner circle in my world in that way. I read books. I learned that everywhere I go, I'm carrying around with me the experiences from my childhood. And if I want to be the best mom I can be, and if I want to be the best person that I can be coming here today to spend time with you, I need to look at my past. So I did. I found a therapist in Shasta County who does tapping as a way of healing trauma. And I went to her every week until I felt like I had dealt with my stuff. You know what I mean? Like, I get it now. I understand the science of it, and I know what I need to do in order to be the healthiest person I can possibly be. So that's the good news. When you learn about this, your past does not dictate your future. The other thing is, and the reason I wanted to pull this slide up, aces2high.com is the site you go to take your ACEs score, but it also asks you to take a resilience assessment. I innately knew how to rein in adults in my child. Even though things were going bad in my household, I went to other people's households and adopted my friends' parents. So I have amazing resilience because I had lots of support. By the way, the reason that I would go anywhere to share this message and why it's so cool that we can do this televised though, so that we can all share this message, every one of us in this room has such a powerful role in the lives of young people. The one thing that mitigates childhood trauma is relational health. Relational health is the one, Dr. Perry teaches that. That is what every single one of us in this room has to offer, is relational health. And it takes one caring adult to change the trajectory of a child's life. They've proven that over and over and over again. Look at any case study of any foster youth. They will always go back and tell you it was that key adult that believed in me, that gave me permission to believe in myself, and that made it so that I was strong enough to do this thing. I work with young people right now and in their lives, and I know how impactful my words and actions are in their life, and I don't take that for granted, not for a single second. So that's the good news of it. You're all very resilient because you're here right now, regardless of your ACEs score. Yes.
Sorry, my brain's tired. So here's the.
I just wondered if you could repeat what you said about relational health, see, I can't even talk, words are hard.
I'm with you.
Relational health
mitigates. It mitigates your trauma. Consider this.
Thank you.
I'm thinking about 2 4th grade boys who both lost their homes in the fire, right? One boy, the one boy that I'm thinking of comes from a very dysfunctional home where there's a lot of toxic stress. His mom could barely keep herself together with that whole thing coming down. I'm thinking about another 4th grade boy who lives in a very stable home where the adults lost everything, but they could make sense of it. They could get through it, and they clung together as a family through that experience. This other boy did not have that experience, even though they both lost their homes, right? Same experience, you would think, same experience. This boy had relational health. This boy did not. This boy has still not recovered and still struggles on a regular basis with the fear, with the loss, with the PTSD of it all, because relational health mitigates it. So the reality is, we can't go into these homes of these families and fix things. We can't. I've tried. I take my custodian with me. I'm knocking on their door. I go and sit on their couch. I would wear boots in some homes because I knew that cockroaches would climb up my legs. I'm not even kidding you. To get into the home to make those connections with the parents. Because we cannot do this just with addressing our school children. It has to be multi-generational. We have to get to the parents, or else this is going to keep happening. We're going to keep repeating this cycle. Getting in and working with the parents and connecting with them, helping them understand the science of this is how we can shift it. Gosh, I was just headed in a direction and I lost my train of thought. See, it's late. I'm with you. But the power is in teaching them about this, in understanding for ourselves what we can do to keep ourselves in a way of showing up to be the best version of ourselves that we can be for them, and then teaching them how to do that as well. When I work with parent groups and I teach them about this, all these light bulbs go off. They want to know more about it because now all of a sudden they can understand it. The brain is a pattern seeker, and if you can make sense of something, you can address it and you can heal it. That's what we were talking about, the mitigation of stress. Because I can't go in and change their home, but when they come to me and they're at school with me, I can offer them relational health. I can offer them confidence, and we'll talk about this next Wednesday. I can help them develop optimism. I can help them develop a perspective of being optimistic. Optimism is one of the key factors in children who are resilient, who can make it through a disaster, who can make it through toxic stress. Children that have optimism as a part of how that's woven into them. And there are things we can explicitly do to help develop that in kids, and we'll talk about that next week. But that's why your role is so powerful in working with young people, because you mitigate whatever it is they're experiencing in their life. And then we help build resilience, so anything they're gonna encounter, they'll be more resilient and they can, handle the stress that's gonna come their way. So I'm gonna transition now. Make sure that I didn't forget to share anything. Okay, anything?
Is there any a fee associated with that? Or
Nope, free.
And the resilience trumps ACEs.org, is that the resiliency test, or the resiliency also on the ACEs?
The resiliency is also on the aces2high.com. I will tell you, just since we're kind of talking about it, I was asked to go work with a group of young people, age 8 through 16, this last summer in Shasta County, foster youth, high risk kind of kids, to do some work with them around this. And when I got there, a woman met me at the parking lot, and she said, Kelly, I just want to give you a heads up. One of the counselors last night unknowingly did the ACEs survey with all the kids. And I almost cried because we are advised through Dr. Laura Porter, Dr. Anda, that we don't do an ACEs survey with young children. They still live with the bear. They still live with that toxic stress, and they had one therapist on this camp to treat all these kids who were crying and upset, and it was devastating for them. So what we do instead is we talk to kids about their stress response system. We talk to them about negative things that happen, but we empower them and we give them tools to handle stresses that they're going to experience. But we don't, I go and work with high schoolers and I don't show them any of the slides that I just showed you.
So in the world of, let's say, CWS, when they work with the adult. So if you're working with adults, it would be appropriate to utilize the ACEs test.
Yes, and what you'll see if you watch the Nadine Burke-Harris video, she gives the 10 ACEs on a clipboard to parents, and she says, I don't need to know which ones, I just need to know how many, which is what schools are now doing, actually. They'll send out their paperwork at the beginning of the school year, and they just want to have a number. You don't need to tell me which ones, because of course we're mandated reporters, but just so they can get an idea of how many ACEs, and you can talk to the parent about that to ascertain how many ACEs the child. But the reality is, we know from DNA that this affects everybody. What we're talking about, we do this with everybody. So to know an exact score of a student is not as critical because we know it's really subjective, and they could have a whole host of other ACEs, racial discrimination, neighborhood violence, natural disaster, on and on and on, right? So the good news about this study is that it really gave us a platform to talk about this because it's based on science. Yeah. Did I answer your question?
Oh yeah, you did.
Okay.
So let's say you are working with the children, so you would go through the parent to get that information?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. That's a good question, and I'm glad we talked about that. It also doesn't matter what socioeconomic class you're in. A good friend of ours is a high school. He's a counselor at like the #1 ranked high school in California, down in Palo Alto. He told us over spring break that they staff 5 academic counselors at that school and 5 social emotional counselors because the rates of suicide are so high, because there are such intense pressures to do well on the test, get into the right college, outperform all of that. So it impacts all of us. And even if you're sitting here and you have a score of 0, somebody that I love very much has a score of 1, but yet this person that I'm thinking of demonstrates a lot of the same symptoms of somebody that came from trauma because it's in his DNA. He came coded up because his ancestors had trauma, his dad had trauma, right? So just give yourself some grace. Even if you have a score of 0, but you kind of struggle with some things, you just don't know. We just don't know. It affects all of us. So the science of the brain is going to help us understand that. And I'm looking at the clock. We've got about 17 minutes. So we're going to do a few more slides. And then we wanted to, I know that you guys here in this room, if you've had questions, you've kind of spoken them as we've gone. But for anybody that's tuning in, if you have questions, we wanted to give 5 or 10 minutes at the end to sort of address those. So, but if there aren't any questions, we'll go on to the next slide when we get to that point. Sound good? Okay. So this is a list. I heard somebody mention Massachusetts earlier. They're really far ahead of us in this. If you go to that website, this is a policy. You print it out. It's like this thick. I just pulled this out of their policy because these are some things that they have identified with people who have experienced trauma. This is just a list of some of the ways that you'll see them behaving. So I'll let you read that list. Are you thinking of any students that you work with? I read that list and I initially thought that it made me think of someone that I know who is on the spectrum, who has Asperger's, right? And then I learned that there's actually, and not that has nothing to do with trauma, but that when you look at kids identified for IEPs, there's close to an 85% correlation. Because think about it, if your amygdala is getting all the attention and you're getting triggered, your brain doesn't develop in the way that it's supposed to. It doesn't wire up the same. Learning really is more challenging for some people who have that experience. Taking the perspective of another really is more challenging. They don't get the social cues that a lot of kids do. We have to explicitly teach that to them. So they really do struggle in these ways. But again, the brain is elastic. We can teach them to do these things. It's all about awareness. Really, all of the knowledge about this is all about shifting perspectives. So we stop talking about how bad these kids are and how we want to get them out of our schools. And we start talking about what's the antecedent, what's causing their behavior. Because we know that every behavior is a form of communication. There's an unmet need. So what's the unmet need? And let's get to it. Let's find that unmet need. And let's go that route instead of trying to label them and kick them out. That's the work that I love to do. So there was an article, gosh, I need to get a hold of it. It was published in the last year. It was about the state of California, that we're one of the top in the nation for over-medicating our school children because we want to label kids. And it's not out of any ill intent. It's because we want to help them be successful. And there are some drugs that will help kids be able to focus and be still and learn. These kids who disassociate, which, by the way, when you're in an environment where you are triggered repeatedly, your brain and body goes into a pattern mode, kind of in like a knee-jerk reaction kind of mode. So if you're in a home where there's abuse and your way of like not going crazy is to disassociate and leave your body, you just check out. Take a kid like that and put him in a classroom and introduce a novel concept. The brain doesn't know the difference between a real threat and a perceived threat. They disassociate. They just checked out. Now they're not there and they missed your whole lesson. Unfortunately, and I tell kids this, I pull back the veil and I explain to them, that's why we do brain breaks on a regular basis, and that's why kids participate, because they get it when you tell them why you're asking them to move their body in the way that you are. I'm thinking of a particular young lady who disassociates. She will miss a big chunk of a math lesson, and then she'll tune back in and realize it. And then what she does is she shames herself. Sucks, I hate this. I can't ever understand math. I never understand this. Everybody else gets this, but I don't get it. You can hear the inner dialogue, right? What happens is, biologically speaking, when you are flooding your body with that experience of that emotion of shame, you are effectively doing the same thing as if you have flipped your lid, because you're flooding your body with adrenaline and cortisol, the two stress hormones that are released when you're in that fight or flight mode. The same stress hormones are released when you are spiraling downward in a place of shame. That was a big deal to me when I learned that. Because if you have any kind of negative self-talk going on, if you're doing it yourself, or if you've got kids that are doing that, you just completely shut your brain off from learning what you're supposed to be learning. Does that make sense? Like, whoa, cancel, clear. Recognize you're doing it. Find some kind of an affirmation or a replacement statement or phrase that you can say so that you change what's going on in your brain and in your body to calm yourself down, so that you can actually be in a place to receive what it is you're supposed to be learning. Does that make sense? To me, that was huge. The other kind of kid, so this is your ADD kid. They'll get labeled ADD. This is because it looks like they just zoned out, right? They're lazy, they didn't get their work done. And then this is your ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder kid, that is misunderstood. And they get labeled as oppositional defiant. They're the ones who live in the home with a bear, and their stress response system is patterned to come out fighting, to protect their mom or to protect themselves. So when they're triggered in the classroom, they're the ones that are up, they're gonna throw the chair, they're gonna, be physical. They're gonna be outwardly expressive with their dysregulation. If we could help classroom teachers understand that this is something the body does, it's not about you. It's about their stress response system being triggered and going into autopilot. The same thing that it does in the home when there's a real threat. I have two labs. I have a black lab and a yellow lab, and my black lab, the female, is a fierce huntress. Last summer, my son and I are gardening, and a baby bird fell from a nest in a tree in our yard, and I knew it as soon as I heard it. I was like, damn, I'm like running as fast as I can. My black lab's name is Ranger, and I'm running, Ranger, no, Ranger, and I'm trying to get her to stop. But what is Ranger's DNA coded for? Get the bird. Do you think she could hear anything that I was saying when I was running after her to try to get her to stop? No. And our kids are no different. By the way, it did not end well for the bird. And I cried. My husband was like, Kelly, it's a blue jay. Blue jays are like awful birds. I'm like, I don't care. It's mommy was upset. It was up there like squawking at the dog. It was horrible. I love all animals. Anyway, so you get the point. We have kids that come into our systems who we feel like we told them, if this will be your consequence. Well, they did this, so they knew that was going to be their consequence. So there you go, black and white. We have a zero tolerance policy here. That doesn't work. It doesn't work. Kids from trauma and kids who are seriously diagnosed with ADHD have a completely different chemical cocktail going on in their brain, and typical consequences don't work. That's why restorative practices is spreading across the nation, because that is the way that we help overcome that. And we'll talk about that next week. Okay, I'm going to share 3 more slides, and then we're going to open it to questions. Sound good? Because I can't not talk about this slide. This is the most powerful one of them all. And I love Dr. Perry for creating it. This is a diagram of the brain. We talked about it with your hand. This is just another way of looking at it. This is all brainstem, lower region of the brain. This is your limbic system, everything relational. That's your cortex, prefrontal cortex. I'm not going to talk about the diencephalon, which is another region. We're just going to keep it simple, three regions of the brain. If I am a teacher and I have the goal of teaching my students Common Core standards and all the things that I need to do before we get to the end of the year, because I used to be guilty of this. We would pull kids out. We would put them in, research-based intervention groups to fill the gaps so they would learn to read. This is what we're doing. Learn to read. Learn to read. Learn to read. And they're not learning to read. That's why they hired me. They brought me on board because the kids weren't learning to read. Here's why. There is no physiological way to get to the upper regions of the brain except through the lower regions. And if you've got little ones who are dysregulated when they come into your school, if you don't find a way to regulate them, to help them feel safe, to get their lid back on, you will not be able to teach them. You won't have access to the upper regions of the brain. It's impossible. Scientifically speaking, it's impossible. And guess who that starts with? The teacher. If I'm not regulated, I'm a contagion to the rest of the class, and now it's very difficult for them to be regulated. When I'm regulated, now I'm a powerful contagion in a good way. It gives them permission to be regulated just because I am. But then I also explicitly teach them how to be regulated. And we systematically reset throughout our time together. Once we're all regulated, ding, now you have access. You have just been granted access to the limbic system, the midbrain. Now that everyone's feeling calm, now we can do all that relational work, that connection. Them knowing that they can trust me, them knowing that they're safe with me, right? Once we've got that relational connection, now, ding, now I have access to the cortex. Now I can teach them concepts in math that they would ordinarily never understand. Because I'm regulated, they're regulated, they feel safe with me. That is how the most powerful learning occurs. Does that make sense? This should be in every teacher credentialing program. If I was queen for the day, I would do that. So here are a couple of slides that just kind of show you what that looks like in a classroom. This is the arousal continuum. And what happens is a lot of these kids come in, and because their stress response system gets set on high alert, they come in right up here. Our goal is to get them down in this area. This is a teacher who doesn't understand the science of what we're talking about tonight. Present, overwhelmed, frustrated, angry. A kid will trigger a teacher like that. By the way, kids come in feeling very out of control. If they can figure out how to tip you over or how to trigger you, it's not personal. It's not. It's what they've learned to do in their homes. It's what they've learned to do. It will actually bring a smile to their face, and it will help calm them down if you tip. My 3-year-old does it to me. I watch it happen, and I'm like, Kelly, get your lid back on. Children in classrooms do that, and we get all, defensive and all puffed up, and then a lot of times we end in a restraint. It never ends well. So understanding this concept is paramount if you want to be successful in a classroom. Conversely, they've got a teacher that understands co-regulation, and this is what they see. The teacher is so powerful. The adult in the classroom has the ability to down-regulate a kid that's about to flip. Sometimes, and obviously, the fewer the words, the better. I will just go and sit next to a child who is dysregulated, and I will intentionally down-regulate my breathing within 5 or 10 minutes, depending upon the child. Most times, I'm going to say, their breathing will match mine because I'm so contagious sitting next to them. So, I'm going to stop right there. Let me just quickly look at what the next slide is, see if we're not at a... Let's do this. Well, we're going to do... The next slide is a brain break. That's a really fun one. Let's go ahead and do it because you could use this tomorrow. This brain break is the #1 voted brain break with kids that I work with, kindergarten through 8th grade. It's called the countdown. It requires you to stand up. So people that are tuning in, we invite you to join us. It'll be really quick. We're just going to count down from 5. So you're going to use your right hand, your left hand, your right foot, your left foot. You're going to be counting down. You're going to use expressive language to count down. When we count all the way down, we'll clap to signify that we're done. Sound good? Here we go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 4, 3, 2, 1. 4, 3, 2, 1. 4, 3, 2, 1. 4, 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. 2, 1. 2, 1. 2, 1. 2, 1. 1, 1, 1, 1. So, what physiological element does that incorporate? Why do you think kids like that? Rhythm, repetition. It's the heartbeat. Yes. Okay. Go ahead and have a seat. So, that is the countdown. So this is a good point to check in, kind of openly all together. What's resonating? Do you have any questions? What might you use in your classroom? Just kind of things to think about as we end our session together this evening. Anybody from our remote location areas that have any questions, any clarifications? Anybody here in this room? Any ahas, epiphanies? Yeah?
I was going to say I had attended therapy to work through some of my own issues, and I forgot the acronym of the letters, but it was you would talk about traumatic events, and she had headphones on, and the noise, the
EMDR.
Yes. And I read about it and I understood the reprogramming your brain's trigger to stress, but I never made the connection of the correlation of the rhythm of the heartbeat and it being a soothing sound because of being in the womb with our parents. I never made that connection. So that was my aha moment.
That's a great aha. When you do, if you, like what I did was the tapping, there's a device that it goes underneath your legs and it's thump, 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 thump. The whole time it's the heartbeat while you're tapping and addressing the things on your meridian points. And we'll talk about tapping next week when we're together. But yeah, great connection.
Yeah.
I don't work specifically with children. I work with the adults that have children.
Nice.
And they definitely have indicated and expressed multiple areas in ACEs so that they struggle.
Right.
And for me, I'm a fun guy anyway, so the fact that I can incorporate something that's
I love it.
more, dare I say it, fun in that stressful environment is so eye-opening for me and exciting. You know, I'm really excited to try these practices with those individuals.
To give them tools in their homes so they
and
don't
to empower them. So that feels really good. And the regulating to relate to reason. You know, my goal is to try to get them to start participating.
Yes.
So and it stems from their lack of regulation. So just a whole nother perspective on how to get them to engage. Thank you for that.
I love it. Yay. That makes me so happy. That was worth the 3-hour drive.
No, I really like the same one, the regulate, relate, reason. I used to teach high school, and sometimes we don't talk about high schoolers because they're special and we think they should already know things that they don't. But one of the things I was just thinking is that how you have to regulate teach them to regulate all the time. So even when you're reasoning and you think this is like an academic task, we have to go back. Okay, yes, they did give you some bad criticism on your essay, but let's go back and talk about let's calm down, let's breathe, let's get back into body. And then this is your classmate. They don't want to hurt you. So let's build that relationship. We have a safe place. Yeah. And now we can hear about how you should use spell check, so I just think that
great point. It is.
It's so important to have it every single time. And that was just a really nice reminder.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. And I will add to that when we know we're about to dose a child with stress in a lesson, like introduce a new concept, we absolutely do something that's rhythmic, that's regulatory to calm them down in their brain so they can handle this next new thing that we're going to try to teach them. Last comment? Yeah.
Well, I attended your training a year ago, and it was awesome. And I'm a counselor, so I use it all the time in my small groups, just a lot of those tangibles to get them grounded and refocus and get their lid back on.
Right.
But just a couple things that I just see the need of so much, and I'm going to walk away being like, yes, we need to do this, is that community outreach piece with parents is so often it's they're over there. Yeah. Their kids are here, and we don't bridge that gap at all. So I just see such a need for that whenever I come to these trainings. How do we get there?
Yes.
It'll be another day. But
each community is doing it in their beautiful way.
Yeah. And we have lovely ladies like this at Healthy Start who are doing it. But I'm just thinking in terms of school staff, what can we do?
Yeah.
And then just the way we set up our classrooms, we are triggering the daylights out of these kids. I think of some of our kindergartners who've never been in a school setting. Some of them are still learning the language.
Yeah.
And there are almost 30 in one class with one adult. And so I'm just I'm leaving going how do we make it better for them? Because
I know
it just feels overwhelming for the adults and the kids. And it just takes a long time for them to get that sense of stability in those rooms. Not by the fault of anyone, just because of the way that our system is set up.
And what you're talking about is this, because that's all sensory input. All of that around them is sensory. That's why some kids, the least restrictive environment is not a classroom where there are 30 kids. They do better in a community day setting because they can actually breathe and it's calm, believe it or not. So, you know, we're at the forefront of all this, and we are seeing minds open, and we're seeing legislation change. By the way, Nadine Burke-Harris, February 11th, was appointed for the first time ever in the history of California, our Surgeon General of California. California is the state to be in. We're going to see, goodbye, thank you. We're going to see huge shifts occur just because she's in that leadership role. All right, I think that's our time. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next Wednesday, hopefully.